what his purpose consisted of, BION stated that a set of hypotheses which form a deductive system, that is, which is arranged in such a way that from some of the hypotheses are premises, all the other hypotheses logically follow. The peculiarity of psychoanalysis is that the scientific deductive system is a series of hypotheses about hypotheses about hypotheses. I think Whitehead says something like similar. Any system of hypotheses in which certain hypotheses occupy a high level in the particular system and are used as premises from which lower level hypotheses are deduced. Now, he believes that if you really make clear that that the interpretation, that the open discourse in the patient and the interpretation were similarly hypotheses presented about some fact, that you could really measure that. Psychoanalysis and psychotherapy have been accused since the time of Freud of being scientific because it's not precise, because you cannot measure, it's not instrument capable of measuring. But I always felt that, I never felt myself, when I've been accused in those terms, in the need of defending myself, because I think that it's a confusion of the person who say that is confusing the phenomena with the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Because our liver and the liver of the caveman is the same liver. Liver have really progressed very much, you know. But the mind of the caveman and our mind is quite different. So the mind is an organ that exists. I mean, it controls the whole body, controls the whole world. And then we cannot use the same instrument that we can use to measure the liver, we cannot use to measure the mind, because we will fall short. So when people say that psychoanalysis or psychotherapy or psychology is not scientific or because it's not precise, they're making a big mistake, because if you were to use a precise instrument to measure the mind, you would not be able to do it. So the instrument had to be in some way similar to the phenomena that is studying, and that's it. So then don't ever get involved in trying to defend psychoanalysis, because psychoanalysis, it is a science, but it's a science according to what supposed to study and deal with, which is the mind, and the mind is not precise, it's open. And BION discovered that. I think, I feel bad to say this, because I feel I'm criticizing BION, you know, and how could I mean, thinking in a humble way, I feel that, how could I be critical of BION, a guy who was really close to be a genius? But how else can you understand that? How else that this guy spent so much time, so much energy in writing about an instrument that he thought he wanted to be properly used, and at the end he said it's good for nothing. It's only a waste of time. That's what he said at the end. And if you read those 4 books that form his theory, which are the learning from experience, elements of psychoanalysis, transformation, and the one that you have there, interpretation and attention interpretation.
Oh, okay.
Attention interpretation. If you look at the index of those 4 books, you will see that in elements of psychoanalysis he only talked about the greed. He never mentioned awe, for instance. If you take those 2 elements, the greed and awe, in elements of psychoanalysis the greed never mentioned awe. Transformation, a lot about greed, certain mentions of the awe. And then in attention interpretation, it's all about awe and nothing about the greed. So obviously his mind was evolving, and he's becoming aware that, I mean, I think BION have a similar problem similar to Einstein, when Einstein was dealing with space, time, and velocity.
Mm-hmm.
So how did he put velocity and time in space, until he discovered that the 3 are influenced to each other? So how could he put intuition, which was the main issue that he evolved and developed afterward, in the greed?
Mm-hmm.
So at the end he say O. You know where he plays O?
Presumably here.
Where is that?
Well, this seems to be a blank space.
No.
No?
No. Where do you think he plays O?
Where, I thought I read that somewhere, but,
In which square of the grid he plays O?
would it be somewhere here?
Where is that?
Under alpha elements?
No. It's a beta element.
It's a beta element.
Yeah. Because it's unknown.
Oh.
Everything, every wild thought, every unthought thought is a beta element. The difference is that when intuition appears, he said you have to pick it up with an act of faith. I mean, you have to trust yourself.
Oh, okay, so it still
Because if
remains
you
a
don't pick
beta.
it up,
You
it
don't,
stays unknown.
You don't digest it
That's
first.
right.
Yeah, okay, got it. Yeah. I didn't read your whole book, I just read the chapter you told me to.
I wouldn't say that.
I'll get
Keep it to
to
yourself.
it. I'll get
So,
it.
so I think BION use the analytic geometry invented by Descartes on X and Y, and then create two dimensions in the grid, or a horizontal one that he based on Freud paper, very well-known paper. I think it's from the 20s. The two principles of the what do you call it? I don't remember now. Anyway, I will remember anymore. So, and he uses paper from Freud, which is on all these things that he plays on the grid of notation, attention, inquiry, and action, and how Freud described the mind. They were all taken from Freud. So, and then let me see. I have this. I brought this exercise in the grid. Would you be interested in that?
Yeah.
Because I present four. Is the it's very much what is here, but this has the attempt to make psychoanalysis a scientific system, the problem, I say, the problem, and then finding a solution, this type of thing. So that could be useful for you. I mean, there's a lot in this paper that I have sent it to you, which is a chapter in the book. I took a lot of things from this that I wrote some time ago. Anyway, so the horizontal axis represents the mind. Is really a synchronic view of a space. Okay? Is how do the minds operate? So the first square is the definitory hypothesis. Definitory hypothesis is anything. I mean, what the patient says could be a definitory hypothesis. What we say as an interpretation is a definitory hypothesis. So, I mean, it's a statement made. It's a statement made about something. And it carries a positive thing. We say, you know, that this table is long, meaning if we say it's long, it's because it's not short. So it always involves two things. It involves a positive and a negative one in the statement. So the first that would be the first part of the horizontal axis that he called axis of uses. Then the second part, which is the one he represented with the letter C, I don't think he said what he got it from, but I think he used the expression the proton pseudos. And the proton pseudos, they represent false or lies, and it's possibly taken from Aristotle's The Prior's Analytics, Book 2. And then Strachey said that it was used, this concept was used by a Viennese physician, Max Hirsch, in a congress where Freud was a secretary. And the image is taken because Freud uses himself as an expression of the lies, the first lie presented by a historical patient. So BION used it as a form of defense. This is a defense, lies. The way that the ego attempts not to know something that is knowing. So then there is notation. Notation, I mean, this is how our mind can work in relation to fact, notation, attention, inquiry, action, or this is the way that we act as a therapist in relation to the patient's mind, or how the patient's mind will act in relation to our interpretation. This is how any mind will act and work in relation to a fact that is presented. So the horizontal axis, beyond say, it will be based on the model of containment, containing containment, because the definitory hypothesis has to be contained. If it's presented as threat, the hypothesis contains the mind because it's a threat, and the mind will react by lying or repressing or refusing it. Or, and that could be noticed, an attention can be used, an inquiry can be started, and an action will be taking place.
So,
And then at the end, it means that the grid is open to further discoveries. Yes?
so is this where the negative comes in?
Yeah, these are defenses.
Okay, but the negative that you talked about in the
Oh,
paper.
but we can talk about negative afterward, but we can read about it.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a short thing, but no, we will go to negative after. So the vertical axis, column 4 refers to what Freud defined as attention, especially to the way in which the analyst listening takes place, to free floating attention, or to the search and discovery of meaning. It also refers to the attention given to repetition of previous proposition or constant conjunction. You know what constant conjunction is?
No.
I think it's the point you took from Hume, yeah?
Yes.
Or BION took from Hume.
Yeah, he got it from Hume.
Yeah.
But you know what it's about?
Well, it's just Hume's idea of causality. So that whenever his theory of causality, whenever we see two objects together, constantly conjoined is the word he uses.
Yeah.
Then we...
Happen by chance.
Yes.
And this is how things are related.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
in the history of all of us, things remain associated by links that are in relation to that fact that could have been just something that took place by chance. For instance, if in this table at a given moment a present was given to you, but then I hit myself with this corner, the table has different representation according to the association we have established with particular facts in relation to our history. And they are conjoined to those facts that happen by chance.
Okay.
So this is what is constant conjoins. They are constant conjoins, so this is how they repeat. And this is the work we do. We try to find those associations that keep facts linked with each other according to things that happen by chance. So the column 5 is related to inquiry, curiosity, exploration, discrimination, and so on. Now, in the first degree, BION refers to this column as to the Oedipus. Oedipus mainly because BION wrote a lot about Oedipus and the situation with Tiresias. You know the myth of when all of these things that were happening and thief, and then he was inquiring, and he consulted Tiresias, the soothsayer, to tell him what was going on. So, I mean, he refused to tell what happened, to the truth. but Oedipus really got more interested and really pressured Tiresias until he told the truth that he didn't want to say, meaning that he killed his father and he married his mother. So BION said that Oedipus was stupid by he being so curious, which at the end, I mean, really brought the destruction to his life. I say that we have a need in our work to create some kind of coordinates, and in order not to get lost. So, and I think that what brought BION to create at a given moment, you need to create an instrument to measure fact. And the thing unbelievable is that he really believed in that. He really believes at the time that it was possible to make of psychoanalysis some kind of a precise science, like geometry and things like that. He talked about the red angle representing incest or something like that. I don't remember, but he used many ways like that, and to give interpretations to geometric figures and so on. So he created degree as an instrument to measure the mind, and the first book that he wrote about that was on the horizontal axis of the grid, which was Elements of Psychoanalysis, which is a very difficult book. And then about the vertical one was Transformation. And then he wrote the two papers on the grid in Cesura, and then later on about taming white thought. So he was interested to find a way that he said that psychoanalysis is a scientific, it's a deductive system that is based on hypothesis about hypothesis about hypothesis. That what patients say to us, it's a serious hypothesis, and the interpretation that we make are always hypotheses, because after all, we don't know how things were. So, but he thought that he could really create an instrument to measure that. And this is why he produced the grid. The grid has a horizontal axis and a vertical one. The horizontal axis, he used a paper from Freud on the formulation of the two principles of mental functioning. It's a very well-known paper. He copied that paper, and this is why he used from that paper Freud's concept of notation, attention, inquiry, and action. So in the horizontal axis, there is definitory hypothesis, which means it's usually the manifest discourse of the patient or the interpretation from the analyst. Then the second part is what he named it using psi, the Greek letter psi, and this is come from Aristotle's concept of proton pseudos, and that he wrote about and representing lies, false and lies, and then and Freud used it himself also when he named proton pseudos the expression of the first lie presented by a historical patient. And instructors say that Freud got a copy from a Viennese physician, Mark Herz, because he was the secretary when Herz was using that in a congress. Anyway, that column represents the lies and what is false, meaning defenses. The defenses that try to defend against the truth presented in the definitory hypothesis of the facts. So the second one is notation, attention, inquiry, which is self-explanatory themselves. Now, this is how a mind works synchronically at any time, any of us at any moment. This moment, when I'm talking, your mind is usually making notation, paying attention, could have inquiries, and then you can say something or make a comment or whatever, an action. So that is the way that the patient mind works when the patient is talking about it. This is the way the therapist works when the patient is making an interpretation or making a statement. The horizontal axis, you say, the model that uses is the model of containment, because it is the mind trying to contain a fact, a truth, or defending from the truth, using the defense, which is false and is a lie, and will act upon that accordingly. So it is, we contain the fact, or the fact contain us. If we contain the fact, we might be able to go pay attention and inquire and find out the meaning behind, which is the truth. Or if we contain by the fact, then we will be contained by the defense, and we will repress or use something in order to not to be able to conceive what is truth, what is present, what is really true in the definitory hypothesis. And then there is a vertical element, the vertical column. The first one is beta element. Beta elements are beta elements is like it's a sense perceived by it's a fact perceived by the senses and stored in the mind, but that present the possibility of knowing what it's about. It's a presumption. There's an inclination towards that we might be able to digest, meaning understand through notation, attention, inquiry, and so on, and provide a meaning, or we might not and remain a stored element forever. So beta element represent any element that is in the mind and that have not been given a true meaning to it. So then there is a function, the alpha function. The alpha function is a function which has the capacity to provide a meaning to the beta element and change it into alpha element. Beta elements, since they exist on their own, but they cannot be used for creative thinking, they only can be used as action. So beta elements are all in the column 6 because they jump, from beta, from the first column to the column 6, because they can only be used as a projective and introjective identifications, not as a form of dialogue, of thinking, of creativity. So they are like missiles. Alpha element change that into element that can be used for creativity, for thinking, for what he called alpha element. The vertical column move according to Melanie Klein position, the paranoid schizoid depressive position, in the sense that it progresses by providing greater senses of sophistication as they move down from A to H. Each of them is a preconception to the next that follows. It's an element in waiting for an understanding to be provided to. It's like the mouth of a child in waiting for the breast. That when that is realized, then an experience takes place and a realization takes place, and it moves from a presumption, a preconception, to a conception. And then it can move to a concept, and even to a theory and a model and whatever. So, in order to that to happen, BION say that there has to be a degree of unsaturation, meaning like the breast. It is the hunger of the child that moves the child towards the breast. It's that unsaturated longing that move the in the search of a realization. He said there are many mechanisms that provide that move in the column. One is the same concept of that make the move from the paranoid schizoid to the depressive, which means is how part objects consolidate and form total objects. So that in a similar way, this is how the progression formed from beta elements to algebraic calculus. But the other means, like particularization, which is abstraction. Abstraction means to make a particular fact a general fact. For instance, it's what we do when we make an interpretation. Interpretation is a consequence of a work of the alpha function that take one element and create an abstraction. The patient that you saw, I was telling him today that he has a phobia that I had never seen in my life before, because he fears himself.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never seen a person who is so terrified of being human. This is a person who have a very difficult life because the mother died from lightning when he was 2, so died in a second, disappeared. He spent 5 years with his grandmother, and which really was very good provider for him. When then his father remarried, took him away from her, moving to Canada, and this woman then have children of her own, so always remain aside. Nobody pushed him, nobody mistreated him, nothing. He was just left there. This guy is a very bright guy who really worked his mind strongly in a very concrete way. He's a very practical person. He's very rich, more than all his family and all his friends and everybody. He's a very wealthy guy. And he had gone in that way. I mean, he come with 2 telephones and, answer one. This is the way he comes to my office. Answer the phone. So he's always busy. He go to China, he goes here, so he's always involved. But then he had a problem with one eye, that he have a retina detachment. And then he was operated. And then this is why he consulted, because he started to have panic attack. He couldn't sleep at night. He have somebody he need to call because he also married, and the wife died of cancer. They were divorced when she died, but and then he married again, and the wife left him. And I can understand all of that because it's a guy who doesn't really get involved emotionally. He's never there. He's there, but he's not there. So then, that, for instance, one thing is that he told me at the beginning that he could not, it was very difficult for him to turn the television off. He couldn't do it, because when he did that, then he would be terrified. So he needed the television on. I said, well, that's the lightning. When you turn it off, you kill your mother. You disappear. So, okay, so to a particular fact, we make a particular fact a general fact. He's hunting for his mother everywhere, but at the same time, he's terrified of any close relationship. So whenever he finds that, he's a nice-looking guy, he's a wealthy guy. He told me he's a gold digger. He just looking around, showing his money to get women, which is, it can happen anyway. So, but then he finds the women, and he's terrified of that. So he's always alone and always searching. So when you get one fact, losing the mother at the age and the disaster of his life, then you can really progress in a statement that go from a beta element to more so sophisticated thing. I was telling him today that it's very hard to help him because he wants other people to be interested in something that he's the only one that can be interested.
And yet you're going away.
Yes, I know. I know that. We're talking about that.
Yeah.
We're talking about that. It's a big thing about him. So, but even if I go away, I want to leave him with a feeling that he's the only one who can do something for him, and he really has to give attention to himself, because he will be okay as far as the nature doesn't talk to him.
As far as nature doesn't talk to
His
him.
nature doesn't talk to him.
Yeah,
So which
yeah.
is why he needs the TV on.
Huh?
Which
Yeah.
is why he needs the television on, because if it's off, he has to pay attention to himself.
Yeah.
And he's scared of himself.
Well, he's okay as far as he feels he's in control. He owns nature, like he owns money. He owns money, he owns you, he owns me, he owns everybody, because he money, he pay you, he buy anything he can buy. He buy anything. So he owns the whole world because he can buy it. And he know people will abide to that. But he cannot buy nature. So when nature talk to him like he did with the eye, he becomes a terrified 2 years old little boy. So I said, you are like if somebody who is afraid of his shadow. How can you get rid of your shadow? You know, have you seen a little child being afraid of the shadow? You never seen that?
The little child
A
afraid of
little
the shadow?
child being afraid of the shadow?
Afraid of the child, not the shadow?
No,
Of the
afraid of his own shadow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that. I saw
Yeah.
the video the other day. It was really, I mean, it sounds like amusing, but it's, I think, be very frightening. Anyway, there is another thing in the beyond only. I remember many years ago, because I really got involved, very much involved at a given time during my training in Piaget. And I started to read Piaget. Piaget wrote, oh my God, I mean, you know, he wrote about 70 books and I don't know how many papers. But I found it fascinating, the way, the methodology that he used to understand the way children thought. I found that really fascinating. So I got involved, but then I felt that it was something like a missing link. And I remember saying once, a marriage between Piaget and Melanie Klein is absolutely indispensable. You know, it was back in the 60s, when I did not know at that time, I did not know very much about BION at that time, which is what BION was doing. Because the issue with BION, that he really filled that gap. Because his psychology, it seems like his psychology is cognitive, but it's not, because he's using Klein, which is psychology of affect, and he's putting it together.
But he's
So
breaking it down like Piaget broke it down into small pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that. But for instance, he introduced these here, also the presence of emotion. And he talked about premonition. He said premonition is to the emotions like preconception is to the cognitive aspect of the mind. And I think he's talking about something that I also refer in another paper that I call the emotional entanglement between what I call conceptual traumas and preconceptual trauma. Part of the anxiety, and the anxiety that we suffer sometimes, is a consequence of a failure of reality testing. Because reality testing is supposed to discriminate between what belongs to now and what belongs to the past, what belongs to inside and what belongs to outside. I mean, it's a four-dimensional activity, silent, automatic, that we exercise in order to discriminate between space and time. When reality testing fails, and it easily fails, then what is from now get confused with the past, and what is outside is confused with what is inside, and then we're in trouble. Because, so I call it entanglement because I was thinking of the quantum physics. You know, in quantum physics, they talk about two particles that are very distant, and one particle moves, the other one moves also, as if they were related. So, and I think this is what happened. When there is a conceptual trauma of any kind, could be very, very simple, immediately triggers issues from our past. And the main issue that triggers is that equation that is very traumatic, which is the relation between the child, which is absolutely helpless, and the powerfulness of the adult. And that's what creates the anxiety at the present. Because when we really think, when we use our alpha function and think that nobody can do anything to us, I mean, really, truly, there are many, in the system, there are many ways we can protect ourselves and whatever, as an adult. We really, I mean, quiet down, and then we can really deal with the anxiety that we're suffering, because the anxiety is usually automatic, because without thinking in an unconscious way, the equation of helplessness and powerlessness of the adult takes over. So it is the entanglement because of the failure of the reality testing that induce the present trauma to trigger the trauma from the past, that we all have from the past. So becoming aware of that, I mean, BION said that it's always a premonition in us about that kind, like a signal theory that Freud talked about, the signal theory, so that can trigger, as an explosion from the past and takes over the anxiety. So then becomes like a conception. Now, then he referred to the link that we were talking about last time, the link. So he said it's very important to become aware, to use alpha function to digest, emotional links like hate and love. But what he didn't say, and this is something I have thought about myself, because he just mentioned the links, but he don't say how does that happen? How does it change from a premonition to a feeling and an awareness and a conception, and then and at the end, how do we really take over ourselves and help ourselves? Rescue ourselves from being within this emotion that is usually from outside or from the past. And I think that has to be related to the change from negative link to positive link. I refer to negative links that are false, that are not related to the present time, but related to the past. I have something here that we can read about, some cases that I wrote about. So if we get our official reader here, perhaps...
You want me to? Okay. I thought Victor was going to.
I got this from our common friend, what do you call it? The Brazilian guy,
Paulo Sandler?
Paul Sandler. He sent this to me, and which is he have worked on he have add another dimension to the degree, and we will talk about that. It's very interesting.
So you.
So we will talk about it.
So you want me to read this?
Yeah, read that.
Okay.
These are some cases where I want, because it's difficult to. It's very simple, but it's difficult to describe the change from negative to positive link. I told you about see a movie that was called As It Is in Heaven.
Yeah,
I will tell you about the movie after.
Yeah.
Okay.
A man in his 40s, whose mother died when he and his younger sister were little, was referring to his difficulties with his adolescent daughter. Remembering something I said before, he stated that he felt trapped between guilt of holding or keeping her and the anxiety of letting her go. I said that such a difficulty might be related to his own painful memories about his mother abandoning him, that perhaps it was easier for him to act out that difficulty by retaining his daughter than to talk about it now, as if by holding on to his daughter he was holding on to his dead mother. He remained silent and started to cry, saying that those memories were too painful. I said that a little boy in him aches because felt abandoned, helpless, and hopeless. He continued talking and said that he was depriving his daughter from achieving her independence. It was like making her an extension of himself. After a pause, he said that he remembered a person who applied for a job and wanted the company to meet his demand instead of the other way around, similar to what he felt he was attempting to do with his daughter. He continued for several minutes, talking, laughing, and turning to look at me, as he wanted me to join his remarks and good humor. I then said that he was referring to some very painful memories from the time his mother died. However, he then moved into something else that portrayed a completely different emotion that I was tempted to join him, but felt I was becoming an accomplice in the part of him that was abandoning negative links. The sad...
This is about, repeat that again.
Yeah.
So,
However...
he started to laugh,
Yeah.
and he wanted for me to become an accomplice of that.
Yes.
Okay.
He then moved into something else that portrayed a completely different emotion that I was tempted to join him, but felt I was becoming an accomplice of the part of him that was abandoning, quote, bracket, negative links.
Okay. That he was acting, he was abandoning him.
Mm-hmm.
Like his mother abandoned him.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted me to abandon the child, the sad child, the helpless sad child that he was a few minutes before.
Did you feel sleepy when that happened?
No.
Oh.
But I do feel sleepy sometimes. But
Yeah.
not with that particular, no.
Yeah.
No.
I was just wondering because I'm dealing with a similar case.
Oh.
Okay. The sad and helpless little boy, abandoning the sadless, helpless little boy in him. Could a part of him be repeating with himself something similar to what his mother did to him when she passed away? Obviously, the part of him that had moved away as he changed his emotions was not a very concerned, loving, or containing element, positive links, towards his own feeling of abandonment, helplessness, hopelessness, and despair.
Read the other one.
A 52-year-old social worker in analysis for the last 5 years was the youngest of a family of 6, whose parents got divorced when he was only 5 after a rather bitter separation. Both parents were described as very severe and aggressive, who physically abused all the children. He originally consulted because of insomnia, paralyzing bouts of anxiety, and a sense of persecution. We were able to observe the existence of a pattern in the emergence of this crisis that seemed was precipitated whenever he complained of dealing with someone, either client, judge, or opponent colleague, that he sensed as being too hostile, dishonest, or manipulative. At a particular session, he started by recounting a situation where a 7-year-old daughter said she had had a dream where her mother appeared as some kind of a monster that woke her up very frightened. He consoled her until she went back to sleep. Then he started to repeat what he had been saying for the last 4 or 6 sessions, that a client he had been dealing with for some time and who he described as rather a bully had told him several months ago that if he did not win his case, he will kill him. Although he admitted this statement was expressed anecdotally, he did not find it very funny. He said that whenever he was with this client, he felt angry and very uncomfortable and feared that because of these feelings, he might do something in order to spoil the case. He had not been sleeping very well for the last week, only around 4 hours, waking up several times and automatically thinking about the case and his client, getting up very tired in the morning. I said that we have observed this pattern in previous cases whenever he felt frightened by someone. He denied feeling frightened and insisted he felt angry. I then said that I might be wrong, but I thought he felt initially frightened, then ashamed, and then angry, but mostly against himself. He did not treat himself in the same manner that he had dealt with his frightened little daughter. It seemed that it was easier for him to treat himself similar to how his parents treated him than to do as he did with her. Perhaps in his mind there was an angry and threatening mother part that preferred to accuse and frighten him instead of consoling him. He also felt ashamed and angry, not with his client, but at himself, as if he judged himself similar to how his father-mother did, as if he were an ashamed, frightened, and castrated little boy. Some time later, he was dealing with a great apprehension about his dependency needs, sensed by his cruel superego as a kind of revolting failure. He often defended himself with the use of self-flagellation as a form of projective identification with the purpose of being rescued, although indirectly, without him knowing about it. He often ignored interpretations given with the purpose of easing this anxiety, and instead complained endlessly about his work, how he experienced insomnia, depression, paralyzing terrors, while at the same time he accused himself of procrastinating his duties, wasting time in nonsense, as well as fear of being fired. He felt the role of psychoanalysis was to mend his failures, and often angrily accused the therapy of letting him down because nothing had changed. There was the existence of a correlation between two bivalent part objects that continuously switched, one accuser and another accused. At a given moment, he shared a dream. He was in front of his boss, who was saying all sorts of terrible things about him, that he was careless, lazy, his work was sloppy, and so on. Then suddenly a distant man from the crowd started to scream, referring to this boss. "Don't believe him. You don't have to believe him. Why does everyone believe him?" He associated the judge in the dream with his father and the continuous accusations and demands he made on him. And I added, "Who is now inside your mind?" Such accusations represented how his father had communicated with him, and now were reproduced as a kind of false or negative link carried out now by the superego against his ego. What was new and a change towards using positive links was the screams produced by the internal object represented by the distant man that he associated with the analyst. Wondering why the superego boss was not questioned, why was he not more loving, positive link, and understanding towards himself now that he was an independent and resourceful adult? Why did he not question his internal parents instead of repeating repeatedly the way he was originally treated by his accuser father and disinterested mother?
No, yeah.
The rejecting adult and the handicapped child. A patient presenting compulsive acting out of perverse psychopathology had used intellectualization, or minus knowledge, negative K, as a common form of defense to neutralize painful emotions from childhood traumatic events or preconceptual traumas. Intellectualization was also a form of competition with me, used to attack or to keep me at a distance. In the transference, she experienced the analyst as an either distant, rejecting mother or the threatening, castrating father. She continuously tried to find ways to either compete, using quotes from authors she had read, or subtly disregarding my interpretations by provoking endless intellectual arguments. Such a pertinacious, pertinacious defense interfered with both of us being able to listen and direct our interest towards an abandoned, lonely, excluded, castrated, and phallic envious inner child. A situation that carried the unconscious purpose of repeating important sadistic aspects of her preconceptual trauma. It was felt that the perverse symptomatology, consisting of masturbatory fantasies or sexual sadistic rituals performed with the purpose of domination, represented attempts made by an envious inner child part in order to control and revengefully attack the father and other siblings, as well as spoiling the goodness of the breast. There was an important tendency to use recurrent masturbatory practices induced by sadistic fantasies, which contrasted with her lack of vaginal orgasm and usual refusal of engaging in sexual relationship with her husband. At a given moment, she presented a short dream. She and her husband were shopping, and he bought something very, very valuable for him, but did not purchase a similar one for her. They came out of the mall, and she told him to be careful because the surroundings were not safe, and he could be mugged. She associated the valuable thing with his penis. Bringing the envious child aspect into the analysis was not easy at the beginning. It was a slow process in which the need for intellectualization diminished. Several years into her therapy, she said, "I gather that the shame I experienced when talking about sexual matters was a defense I used to avoid dealing with those issues." Around this time, she brought a short dream in which the roof of a building was collapsing. She associated the building with a place she often visited as a young woman, where she used to engage in sexual sadomasochistic practices with a boyfriend who lived there. Also with the feeling that such urges had diminished. Then she said that she went to visit a cousin whose daughter has Down syndrome and felt her mother was rather neglectful of the child, who at one point started to cry bitterly and accused the mother of not loving her. "I felt very sorry for the little girl and very angry at my cousin, and I then tried to comfort the girl. I think she could represent a crippled part in me. I wanted to help." I asked if she had the dream before this episode with her cousin, and she said about 3 days before. Then I added that because an intellectual part, defense, of her own roof was collapsing, she felt more aware of the crippled, helpless, hurting part in herself. I considered this session a turning point, because her attitude towards the little girl was corroborating the unconscious message portrayed by the dream. In other words, she responded to this scene and became aware of the little girl, because the roof was already collapsing, and not the other way around. Translated into BION's theory of links, we could say that negative H minus hate, representing the previous emotional link between her careless intellectual adult part and her crippled child part, had changed to a positive L plus love, where there is more concern and awareness about the mean mother in her.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is what I mean by changing negative link. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Any question?
Not at this point, but they're
Not at this point? Okay. So what we could do next is try to do use the grid for what BION say that can be used for, which is like an exercise. So I need another reader here.
The more I investigate the grid, the more I become aware of the presence of a genius. It grants a sense of guidance, support, and strength, approximating to what Gaia provided to
what?
Antaeus? I'm not good with Greek. A structure and conceptualization that carries the competence of clearing the mind. BION, similar to Pythagoras, attempted to apprehend the two sides of the psyche. On the one hand, the nomenon, the intuition or the ineffable, which he has referred to as O, and on the other hand, the phenomenon or the observable fact. BION tries to portray this in the grid, perhaps inspired by Mendeleev. Okay, periodic table, right. The grid is a true a monument to BION's greatness, but as a monument can only be looked at and admired and nothing else. There are two combined axes, one horizontal and another vertical, which can be read from left to right and from top to bottom. There are a total of 56 squares, 8 verticals, and 7 horizontals, most of them already filled by BION, with the exception of a few left to be filled according to him, by someone in the future. The grid does not represent an indispensable element for the understanding of how the mind works. It stands more as a curiosity, as a brilliant attempt to reticulate and what has been said during an analytic session. There is, however, a particular issue that I will consider later related to the appraisal of the mental growth, a concept very contingent upon the relativity of the observer, which could be measured in a more reasonable fashion if the vertical axis of the grid is used. Do you want me to continue?
You know, because this is not what I want you to read is okay, here.
Okay. I will attempt to use the grid by placing it... page 197. I will attempt now to use the grid by placing it in the content of a session. Tony is a 22-year-old and the elder of 2 brothers whose parents became divorced when he was 8 years of age. 2 years ago, he was brought for consultation by his mother, a dominating, attractive, and sensuous woman, who at the first meeting stated that she wanted Tony to see a therapist because she did not want him to become a poor devil like his father and his father's family, adding that Tony had low self-esteem, little ambition, does not have a girlfriend, and only likes to go out with low-class women. At the beginning, the transference was determined by constant self-criticism, as if he, attempting to imitate his mother's accusations, was trying to placate indictments coming from a superego object projected into the analyst, a situation capable of eliciting counter-transference feelings of commiseration and the danger of perverse collusion. He avoided acting out incestuous desires by refusing loving relationships with women of similar social background. At the same time, he debased the internal representation of his controlling mother by searching for lower-class women. All women considered by him as decent were his mother, as if all of them belonged to one species only. This situation trapped and paralyzed him because it created an inner dissociation that induced powerful sexual desires towards these women, and yet at the same time terrified him to think that he was capable of accomplishing those desires. The absence of his father as an essential object that could have rescued him from the Oedipal ambush played a determining role in his life. Go on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. After a while, we managed to identify a child element characterized by feelings of loneliness, isolation, exclusion, and at the same time, intense envy. This condition strongly determined the transference, which usually manifested itself by his not paying attention to interpretations, by making subtle accusations about not making progress, and by a significant decay of his payments. In the counter-transference, I had the impression of a sadistic element attempting to starve an object in spite of a significant abundance, perhaps as an effort to invert what he might have experienced when prematurely weaned because of the birth of his younger brother, a feeling reinforced 7 years later when his parents separated. I was wondering if it also had to do with his aggressive and invasive mother.
Mm.
Yeah?
Yeah, of course. You had to see the mother. I mean,
Oh, okay.
his mother was like one of these misses. I mean, it was a beautiful woman. And then standing, and she wore many skirts like this. I mean, you know, I mean.
Seductive.
Extremely seductive.
Yeah, okay. The session started when he accused himself for not bringing the payment for the last 2 months, explaining that his mother, due to other expenses, did not have the check ready. Imagine, she had to pay $500 for my brother's school, I recalled, without saying anything previous excuses like remodeling in the kitchen, a trip to Europe, and so on. This part of the session could correspond to an element used to deceive and could be placed in A2. My thoughts could belong to B3 or D3, or could be used...
Okay, you have to have this in front of you.
Yeah,
Okay, so read again.
okay.
So you have the grid in front of you.
My thoughts could belong to B3 or D3, so that would be alpha elements with notation, or
Yeah.
preconception with notation. So, how do you determine which it could be, or is that important?
This is an exercise.
Yeah, okay. Or could be used as material for the
We will need
interpretation.
BION to the side, because
Oh, okay.
so we don't have BION.
D6. And
Yeah,
I
I'm sorry,
understand, I understand D6, yeah.
Okay.
But now, oh, did you want to say something?
No, yes.
Okay. But now he was announcing his new explanation with a certain perplexity, not because it could have been the best of his excuses, but because it seemed as if he was searching for complicity against his mother, based on the delay of payments, something I experienced with a certain degree of suspiciousness. There is, on the side of the analyst, a situation that is not clear. It could correspond to a definitory hypothesis, possibly B1 or B2. So B2, that would be the
The
analyst.
defense. It could be a truth,
or
could be or might be not.
okay. It could be the analyst going towards acting out if it was a defense, could it?
Not necessarily, because unless you go in D6 and then there's a change in interaction. But here is you don't know if it's true or not.
Okay.
You have to test it. I mean,
Okay.
when you have a presumption, which is like a preconception in your mind, that when the patient is talking in relation to something, you have a something there as a preconception that you have to really wait and see if in the material, in the definitory hypothesis given by the patient, I mean, it will certify that your preconception is true. Then you change into conception, and then you can really change the concept and provide interpretation.
Okay. So the waiting is really important.
Of course, the wait is important because you don't know. You want to know a bit more.
Yes. Maybe, I thought, Tony was attempting to hide something from himself as well as from me, that he, identifying with his mother, was acting as her accomplice in the process of castrating an object projected into the analyst, perhaps similar to what happened to his father. This hypothesis, that takes place as an attempt to understand what might be happening, could represent a notation about the material corresponding to B4. So it's not...
B3, B4.
Yeah. I was wondering why it was only at B. I understood the 4.
With the alpha function.
Yeah, but I was wondering why it wasn't really...
But you haven't reached that level yet.
You haven't? Oh,
No,
okay.
you're just working on.
Oh, okay.
You have presumptions.
Oh, okay. Okay. Presumptions versus preconceptions.
Yeah, they are preconception.
Yeah.
You're working on your mind using alpha function on presumptions. I mean, preconception that you have to need to be proven one way or the other.
Oh, okay. Because yeah, I was thinking it was more D4, and I was trying to understand why it was only B4.
Because you haven't got there yet. You're still working on. I think.
Okay.
I mean, you could be right. I mean, you know, I don't know. I mean, you know, we can work the grid any way we want.
Oh, okay. Did anybody else want to comment on that? Okay. In an effort to understand the nature of the projection and to introduce also the feelings of impotence and anger I was experimenting with in the counter-transference, which could correspond to B4, I said, "It seems that your needs are not always considered important. Repairing the kitchen, a trip to Europe, or paying your brother's school fees are more relevant than your need to solve your problems. I wonder why." This interpretation represents a preconception, D1. Okay.
There's also an action.
A form of action corresponding to B6.
That's right.
As well as an inquiry, or B5.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this becomes, I read the chapter on the grid in this book.
The chapter
on the grid in the Grotstein's book.
Yes.
And he differentiates a psychoanalytic element from a psychoanalytic object. And my understanding is an element is when it's in one cell of the grid, and like a B4. This interpretation is now a psychoanalytic object because it occupies more than one cell in the grid.
Yeah, according to his definition, yeah, it could be. Yeah. No, but it's usually like that. I mean, I would say you can always move in the grid when you use it. So you're right.
He agreed with me and added that he had never seen it from this perspective, that he found it difficult to demand or protest because disapproval from other people about what he did made him feel awful. From Tony's vertex, what he said could correspond to a conception, E3 or E4, although it could also represent an as-if sort of response in order to please the analyst as a form of defense equivalent to B6, or an inquiry comparable to B5. I found that interesting.
Mm.
So you hold that in mind.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
The other day, continued Tony, one of my classmates started to complain to the teacher about something he thought was unfair, and I felt very guilty and ashamed, as if it was me who was complaining. This aspect could represent an hypothesis belonging to B1, or perhaps an evocation comparable to D3. He continued, or when somebody says something suggestive to a girl in the street, I also feel ashamed. It is like feeling someone else's shame. Then he speaks about his brother, about how different he is, about how daring and direct he is when he addresses women. He remembers something I had said the day before about being afraid not so much of saying something, but of feeling something, about fearing his own emotions, of not knowing how to control himself. His evocation of past experiences as a notation or reminiscence of past events could be located in D3 or E3. He continued, remembering my words, that if he would only let go, he could end up seducing his own mother, could equally be placed in D3, D4, or E4. How come?
Hmm?
How come?
Well, if it's a preconception, something that he's not certain, would be on D.
Yeah.
But if he's certain of that,
It'd
it's a
be-
fact for him,
It would be
it would
E.
be on C.
On E4? Or
It would be in E, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
okay,
in E.
yeah.
In E.
I reminded him that I had also stated that it seemed as if he had difficulties differentiating between his mother and all other women. This last remark could correspond to D1 and D4, but because there is also an Oedipus element present, it could correspond to C1 and C4. Then he remembers a dream. Okay. I think I understand that. He was at a party with many attractive women. One of them, the most beautiful, approached him and invited him to dance. And while they were dancing, they were also kissing, and somebody was looking at them. After some time, he left her, but another woman, even prettier, came close to ask him to dance also, and the same scene was again repeated. At the end, both women were looking at each other, filled with anger, jealousy, and ready to fight for his attention.
He gave no associations. C2, and I said that it seemed as if there was a great contrast between what he usually experienced in reality and the dream content, possibly C4, which is dream thoughts attention, and F4, which is a concept. He agreed and added that in the dream he felt himself just the way he wanted to be, but was not, stating that his brother, who was completely different, was more like the person in the dream, C4, attention. At this moment, as I was listening with my eyes closed to what he was saying, I was suddenly invaded by a particular blue color, and I think it might have represented a dreamlike phenomena, or C1, although I later thought it was a representation of O. I became aware of it later on when I associated this kind of blue color with the one in a water fountain I had built and painted many years previously with my son when he was around 8 or 10 years old. This was like a transformation of O to K and could be placed in C3 or C4. I remembered that the experience of building this fountain was very rewarding for both of us. Using this memory, I then said to my patient that perhaps he was feeling that his father had taught him things to his brother that he did not teach to him, and that this made him very angry, inducing complicity with his mother against his father. This was similar to the complicity he could have developed with her against me, for example, not paying me on time, because he also feels that I, just like his father, had not done in the past, was not teaching him anything either. I thought that he wanted me to teach him how to seduce or make love to a woman without being so frightened, D1 and D6, preconception. He laughed very loudly and added that his father was very good with women, a real Don Juan, who had many lovers, always looking for him, well-to-do women, sometimes from other countries like Puerto Rico, D3. There was a long pause, and then he said in a softly sad voice that he would be very frightened to be like his father because he would not know how to control his feelings, and that he felt he was capable of feeling about his mother in a way that was not proper. This could represent a form of complying as some kind of as-if defense and be placed in D2, although it could also represent a true insight and then would correspond to D4. You are right, he said, but I wouldn't know how to be like that. I would love to, but I don't know how. You are right, my father never taught me. Similar to the previous, D2 or D4. Continue? Oh, well, that's the case.
Yeah, well, I don't remember what I said.
There's the negative grid after this.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Anna wants to know, okay, why don't we read negative grid? Okay.
Okay, BION introduced the possibility of adding to the standard layout of the grid a negative extension, a mirror image, that would expand the horizontal axis from negative n to negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, and negative 1. In this way, he concluded the negative uses could be utilized as a barrier against the unknown or known that is not well liked. Following the theory of transformations, this form of grid presents the possibility of a non-static movement opposite to the direction of those in the ordinary grid from H to A in the vertical and from negative n to 1 in the horizontal. Geometrically, according to BION, it could be represented by arrows showing the direction of the movement, signifying the location of an object. BION defined as violent, greedy, envious, ruthless, murderous, and predatory, without respect for the truth, persons, or thing. It could refer to the relationship between an object and its absence, like the absence of the breast, or to what BION refers to as the place where the breast or penis was. I would like now to refer to the case of L, a 46-year-old patient, the second of 3 sisters, twice divorced, and in analysis 5 times weekly for the past 4 years. We were investigating her relationship with the youngest of her siblings, towards whom she always experienced a disproportional amount of envy because of her achievements. She also feels that her older sister does not seem to hold these kinds of feelings against her. 2 days before we finished work for the summer holidays, she brought a dream. She was in a field party at Dr. P's house, a friend of her family, and everything was nice and peaceful, and the food was magnificent. There was only herself, Dr. P's wife, and her older sister. Her younger sister was not there. They decided to walk away from where the party was, and they found an immense crater like those left by a meteorite. Her sister told her that she was going to jump over, but she thought that she better go around. Suddenly her former husband appeared, very aggressive, looking for trouble. She wondered why her younger sisters were not there. Dr. P and his wife she described as a wonderful couple, good people, and good hosts. He is around 60 years old. And then after a pause she said, he is a radiologist, and you are like a mind radiologist also, because he was you. Perhaps here in your house you are like my host. She provided no further associations, and then, after a short silence, I asked what she thought about the crater. Then almost immediately she exclaimed loudly, "Oh, Mother Earth!" I did not fully understand, but had the feeling she was referring to the absence of a breast. I asked, could that represent the absence of a breast? Perhaps what she experienced when her younger sisters were born, like losing her mother's breast. She argued that maybe that was why they did not appear in the dream. There is only herself and her older sister. My sisters spoiled the party, she concludes. She remembers that her mother on one occasion commented that she had weaned early after her younger sister was born because her mother had an inverted nipple that made breastfeeding rather painful. I added that perhaps a weaned part of her was reacting to the immediacy of our separation because of the holidays, as if this was changing into an absent breast that spoiled her party and was making her feel angry like the abandoning husband at the end of her dream. There is also a part of her that, similar to her older sister, is trying perhaps to jump over the absence with the help of the analysis. I gather that what BION attempted to illustrate with the notion of a negative grid was the importance of the absence of the object. Such an absence becomes a powerful presence, determining the outcome of symptoms and psychopathology. This is something he also associated with being aware, with the alertness of a predator in search of its prey, like hunger looking for food, like a lack of existence looking for existence, or a contained looking for a container, or a definitory hypothesis in search of a realization. BION said it could be personified by a non-existing person like the envy of the dead, whose hatred and envy is such that it is determined to remove and destroy every scrap of existence from any object which might be considered to have any existence to remove. Such a non-existent object can be so terrifying that its existence is denied, leaving only the place where it was. I have observed pathology of this kind in cases that portray history of early traumatic losses, like some of those patients I have described in Chapter 3 related to the deaf-mute object.
The main problem that he will be dealing, it would be the difficulty he will have to contain that envy.
Yeah, yeah.
And not to make it destructive to the point that it will destroy him.
Yeah, he made a comment because I sent him back to Raphael. he had left Raphael, and then he came to see me, and he didn't tell me he had been seeing Raphael. And when I found out, I said, well, what'd you leave Raphael for? And I said, he's very good, you know. So he thought about it and went back to Raphael.
Teach you to speak up.
I should have spoken up.
But he's doing that.
Yeah, he's
He's doing the same thing he does with women.
yeah.
You know.
He's yeah, and he
So
in
the
a way
the
he
main
did it
problem
with
at
me
the end
too.
That he have when he will have a terrible prognosis,
Mm-hmm.
is that he will, the no capacity in him to contain his envy,
Yeah, yeah,
the amount of envy
yeah,
that he has.
yeah,
So he had so much so that he had become rich
yeah,
in order to put the poor in the other.
yeah, yeah,
So,
So
but people
it-
have to be able to think about the envy, as in this case that we just read, where she says, my sister spoiled the party.
That's right.
So then she knows about her envy. So she's containing it and thinking about
yeah, exactly.
He
can't think
he
about
is a
it.
negative greed.
Yeah,
He
okay.
is a negative
Okay.
greed.
So how if he's in the negative greed and can't even contain his envy, you don't want to point it out to him.
No, because he will. For one thing, he's not going to understand that.
No, no.
I mean, from now until then, I mean, he might never get there to understand that.
Yeah.
He might be completely on the sixth column. If he were to, I mean, he would act out.
Yeah,
He would leave you when you get it. When he gets to that, he's going to leave you. For instance, at this moment, he's coming to see me, but he's going to China next year,
Yeah.
next week.
oh, okay. And when's he going to be back after
Who
you
knows?
leave?
You know, he knows. He's in business. He's important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How can he come to see a little worm like me, such an important guy, rich guy, you know?
Yeah,
They have analysts in China now, I hear.
Eh?
They have analysts in China now.
That's right.
Distant
Yeah.
supervision. And
Yeah, he could perhaps.
Has he told you about the two women
Oh yes, he
Yeah,
told me
yeah.
all the women. I mean,
All
not
the-
two. He had more than two. Yeah.
on the go right now?
He had women that only come to sleep with him.
Oh, still
And hold
on the
his
go?
hand.
Oh, okay.
And
You
that's
only
all.
told me about the two.
No, he had many. He buy women.
Okay, yeah, I figured if he was in Taiwan, he might be doing that.
You know?
Anyway, the thing that I like about this case of L is the issue of helping her approach her envy, because the analyst's interpretation is, could that represent the absence of a breast? Perhaps what she experienced when her younger sisters were born, like losing her mother's breast. So what you are dealing with is a gradual approach to the loss, and then she acknowledges the envy. So you're not saying, well, it seems to me, you know, that you have a lot of envy and you
Yeah.
can't think about it.
Oh, no, I know,
No,
no,
no.
you don't do that. No, no, I wouldn't do that.
But
That would be very unempathic and
so
clunky. Yeah,
but he is that kind of object.
yeah,
That he is a negative object
okay.
because
He
what
is the negative, yeah, yeah.
because
wow.
well when he attack his being an animate being, a human being.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, at the end, he's envious of himself.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He cannot allow himself to become human, to be an animated object that needed love of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and who need to love somebody.
Mm-hmm.
In that exchange of love, of being loved and loving the other person. He can't do that. For him, people are objects that he buys.
Yeah, yeah,
So is analysis. So I mean, whatever therapy.
yeah, yeah.
So
You're
the
somebody
prognosis. I mean, we could only come. I say, but the only danger that you're facing is that the day that that nature. I mean, you don't have to talk about envy with him. That nature make you aware that you're human.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go. You will go to an emergency. You're going to be in anybody's hands,
Yeah,
and that's the danger you have.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
But he's like, if it's a good case to present a negative greed, it's this guy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So he's untreatable, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, I made the connection to him about his mother's death and the eye.
He knows that.
Yeah, he knows that. Yeah,
Yeah, he knows that. He knows that, and he doesn't know that
Yeah,
because he doesn't want to
he
know
has
that.
to know it ahead, but he doesn't
He
really
kno-
feel it.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There is a part of you that's completely ignorant.
Yeah,
So he become a frightened, helpless little child, a negative something. You don't even have a place where to put it in the grid. When he
Yeah.
become, I mean, a grown up, I mean, a guy who is in charge of millions of dollars who travel, who go there, suddenly he's a terrified little nothing.
yeah. Well, the DDT suggested under stress he was extremely psychotic.
Well, in a situation like that,
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Yeah. So I understand what you're saying there. Yeah. He has to hide in it.
So you got now what the negative is.
Yes, I think so.
Everybody's clear about the negative?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The negative is the opposite of the, you say, it's like a mirror image.
Mhm,
It goes like this and like this.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, it's a moving toward beta,
Yeah. Yeah. Back to beta, which is psychosis.
which is the consequence of pain, of mental pain.
Yeah.
It's the incapacity to deal with the presence of the absence. It's the crater that that's a very interesting dream because the crater,
Yes.
Yeah.
the craters represent
The
a
inverted
big
nipple.
absence of a big breast. I mean,
Yeah,
there's,
yeah.
there's a nothingness
Yeah.
that she wanted to go around, like that, and which is what because she wanted to jump. I don't remember. She wanted to jump over that. That's what she could do. You know. So anyway, here is my friend Sandler, Paul Sandler, sent this to me. He's working on this. He has a book, and he wrote a chapter, interesting chapter. I cannot remember the name of the book, but he sent a book to me, and he sent this that I will pass it around. You can look at them.
Oh.
But I think it's very interesting. I told him that it's pretty bad that Euclid didn't see this because he could really calculate the price of the land.
Okay, this is 3, a psychotic moment. Yeah, this is really very complicated.
Well, all what he's placing there is the amount of, okay, the intensity, not only the location, but the other dimension involves the intensity of the
Of the affect.
of the affect that is put there.
Though Otto's DDT is different in many ways.
I don't know anything about
It works on numbers which work on intensity. So there you can have positive numbers like plus 20 is extremely OCD. Minus 20 is extreme psychosis.
But OCD is a form of psychosis.
Yeah. It's defense against psychosis in a way. Is it
Well,
not?
everything is a form. Everything is a defense against
Yeah.
disintegration. But OCD is
It's a psychotic
It's a defense
behavior.
against psychosis. I mean,
Yeah.
so much so that you find it very often in psychotic people.
Yeah.
You know, they need to have a control of the thing. You know, torture and things. They have all ritual, magic thinking, in order to deal with the disintegration that they're dealing with.
No, you're right. Yeah. But I'm just explaining the.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I know that he made something, but I don't know myself what is the.
Yeah.
Anyway, so next time we are going to go into the sigma space, which is the change from the BION that is from the grid to more of a BION who uses the psychology of intuition, which I think at the end is what he really was. So the grid was
So the intuition is he's internalized the grid in a way and not thinking about it.
No, I think he realized after a while when he got, I think this is my own thought, and what I did in order to prove that was the index in the 4 books I mentioned to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like elements of psychoanalysis, learning from experience, transformation, and attention interpretation. If you read the index, you see the progress. In elements of psychoanalysis, it's all about the grid,
Mm-hmm.
which is the first book that you wrote. It's all about the horizontal axis. Then he goes into transformation, and transformation is about the vertical axis, but it's also, he started to mention O there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You take those 2 words, grid and O,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at the index of the book, you can see his own transformations.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into attention interpretation, and it's all about O. The grid is never mentioned. And when he was approaching in Brazil and was asked about the grid, he himself said that it was good for nothing, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is what I say. It's a monument that you can only observe and think that this is produced by a genius, but there's nothing you can do. You can do that exercise, eh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what that exercise will do for you, I don't know, because I find more the intuitive BION more useful for me to follow and understand what the patient, what is going on, and that degree itself.
So does knowing this give you trust in your intuition?
I don't think
Or
so.
you don't think so?
No, I
It's
don't
just,
think
okay.
so. This is just for an exercise.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to see. It's a good thing to play. I mean, to fool around and play.
Yeah,
But I like a game. But I don't see it's not. I don't have any use for the grid.
oh, okay.
The only thing, and I owe that to Cynthia, because she insisted that to give a course in the grid, which is what we're doing now, because she said we should demonize the grid so that you, because I agree with her, because one of the first problems that I had in reading BION was that grid was always there, always there, and I couldn't go further. I hate it. I dislike it. I could not understand it. What was going on? It's like mathematics, and I don't like mathematics very much. So until finally I decided to go through it when I wrote the dictionary and find out, well, it's a simple thing, really. It's not a big thing when you get to understand. But it's extremely intelligent. I mean, the capacity to abstraction and conceptualization that guy used in order to produce that is amazing. It's amazing. It's the only attempt, as far as I know, of anybody trying to make a psychoanalysis or psychotherapy or understanding of the mind like a mathematical instrument. The closest one. And then he went bloom to the other extreme. And he became something like a Zen Buddhist master. You know, I was capable of understanding Zen Buddhism by reading that book, Attention Interpretation.
Oh, okay.
No, but I'll tell you what.
Across the table.
Okay.
You know, for instance,
Comic relief.
that I just have a patient. I don't know. I don't remember where here. A patient that, whenever she starts to talk, I will get involved in doing financial calculations in my head. And I find it extremely painful to go back and listen to her. And I didn't have that with any other my patient, but with her, until I discovered why. I don't. It's in somewhere in that book. And discovering, it provided a tremendous awareness of what was going on. There is a paper written by an Argentinian that I cannot remember. I think he died. But it was a very important paper at the time of my training in Latin America. And it's about the patient that makes you sleep. And what he says that the patient that makes you sleep are usually dealing with issues connected with anal problems. So, and that is like gases expelled that put you to sleep. And there are patients
Sleeping
who are
gas.
really fantastic to put you to sleep, and other patients keep you awake.
Awake, yeah.
Now, I read a case that but this is in another book, where I will go from being sleepy to being completely awake, and she went also from similar crisis of being at the verge of dying to be, completely away from whatever was going. I always had the feeling with her that I could really get up and walk away, and she continued talking, without being aware of anything that was going on. So, but there are patients who produce different emotions in you, and you don't feel with other patients. And that is very important to capture that intuitively, to become aware, because there is a lot of meaning in that. Patients that produce you sexual feeling, anger, anxiety, this thing of thinking certain things, being sleepy. I have a patient who put me to sleep, and then he confessed that the previous analyst, he caught him sleeping, and then he denied. And I said, well, I'm not going to deny to you because I'm feeling very sleepy now. There must be a reason why the other one was sleeping, and I'm also on the verge of falling asleep too. So then the question is, what is there in you that will make the analyst fall asleep?
What's there in you?
What is there in the patient?
In the patient, okay.
That
It makes
eventually
sense.
make the analyst fall asleep, because the previous the mistake of the previous analyst, was to really deny it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the patient for make you to sleep, and you're not tired, but you can be tired one day, another day. But every time that patient put you to sleep,
Yeah,
have to be something.
yeah.
So if you pick that up with an act of faith, and instead of really thinking bad about you and becoming defensive about being accused and you've fallen asleep, you can use that to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Which is
yeah.
what happened.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't make me sleepy now.
Yeah, no, I've been bringing it up with her, and she giggles as she complains about her husband. So I remembered what you said about giggling.
Yeah, because
And I'm suggesting to her that there's a feeling there that she's not feeling.
yeah, it could be, and you feel
Yeah.
it for her.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you can end like the caricature George
Yes,
brought
both
here,
sleeping
that you both
through.
doing that. I say to my patient, they say they're very sleepy. I say, well, good, then we can have fresh dreams.
Right. Fresh off the press.
Yeah.